The Speaking of Cults podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from it is at the user's own risk. The views, information, or opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical or other professional advice. Hello and welcome to the Speaking of Cults podcast. This is Chris Shelton, your host. I'm going to be doing a little introduction here today before we get into my interview. And, okay, how do I say this? How do I start this? Let me just say that in the 12 years that I have been an ex-cult member and having left Scientology, I have found the ex-cult space to be just as contentious and just as difficult sometimes, as it is to be in a cult. We have relationship issues, we have trauma issues, we have trust issues, we have scads of differing ideas and beliefs and life experiences that we bring to the way we describe and talk about having been in a cult and having recovered from or being in the process of recovering from a cult. It's a rocky road. And sometimes we are our own worst enemies, and sometimes we make enemies out of people who are in this space, other ex-cult members. And that's not always right. That's not always a good thing to be doing. And sometimes in retrospect or in hindsight, we get to take a look and go, maybe that was a mistake. Maybe I could do this better. Maybe there were other ways of me that I could have dealt with this situation. And sometimes maybe we can come back together and reflect on that. And this week, that's what I've got for you. Jason Horvatic and I have connected about 2 years ago. He is an ex-Scientologist from Australia, and we hit it off, and he had things to say, and we did some shows, and we talked about things, but he had a certain approach and attitude and ideas about Scientology that I disagreed with. And these disagreements and other things led to him going on to other shows and saying things about me and saying things about Scientology that he now looks back on and goes, oh boy, I really wish, I hadn't done that. And that's some of what we're going to talk about today. But the point I want to make is that this is a rocky road. And nobody said anybody on this road is perfect or that we know what we're doing or that we won't change along the way. In fact, the whole point of cult recovery, and really I'm going to say this over and over again, that getting out of the cult is just the first step. It's not, oh, good, I'm out and I'm now done and everything's great again. It's just not like that. And so if you're not changing and you're not growing and learning and trying to do better after you've left a cultic situation, then, I might say maybe that's something to reflect on. Maybe that's something to think about. And it's certainly something I have given a great deal of thought to and have talked with people about this whole process, if you will. And so today, this talk between Jason and I is just a sort of catch up and also a talk about those changes and about how big they can be and how I want to make the point before we get into it that there are always second chances. There are sometimes opportunities to go back and fix things. And so I hope that sets this up properly for what this is today. And I hope that you find this, as always, entertaining, informative, and educational. So here's my talk with Jason. Okay, so Jason, hi. I've done my little intro, so we're just going to jump right into it here. First off, I guess we should just sort of put this to rest. You have in the past said some colorful things in my direction, and I guess we should just sort of throw that out there first, since my audience will, maybe have some memory of that. And to be clear, Jason and I have completely settled things between us, so there's no weirdness or animosity. This is not the first time we're talking. That kind of thing. But we're not going to get into a big song and dance about that whole thing. But I just thought I'd give you a moment if you wanted to say anything about any of that.
That's good to start with that. And fair enough. It probably would have been this sort of elephant on the side of my shoulder, at least. Yes, I will say openly and publicly, I'm sorry to you, Chris Sheldon. I think I was. Well, we'll probably talk about, I think that's the theme of this. The recovery journey is rocky and difficult. And I lashed out in ways that I later on identified as similar to my Scientology behaviors.
Fair enough. Totally. Yeah.
I thought and then I reached out to you. And then another aspect of that is because I lashed out to you in terms of like academic credentials and so on. But as I finished my own degree, my opinion of modern academic credentials is not so, I don't really care, frankly. I think you're doing great work because you're you, whether you have a undergraduate, master's, PhD. I don't really think that's such a big deal these days. I think it's great that we do them, and I'm still going to pursue more academic stuff, and you may too, but it's not like a sort of this like trump card. You call that word trump card's probably ruined now, but the old definition of trump card where you can punch down on someone because you've got a different. I don't care. Yeah,
that's right. Well, I could not agree with you more. The only reason, I have letters after my name is I want people to know that I've taken this subject seriously and I've put real study into it. It is not a status symbol for me at all. If anything, it has higher education. I'm sure you would agree with me. Once you really dedicate and do the time and write the papers and do the research, all it really shows you is how little you know, and you learn a little bit more. At least that was my takeaway.
That was a major takeaway towards the end of university. Was I know kind of nothing. I know like a fraction about linguistics, and I know more about what I don't know. Like there's more to know about it than I could possibly gather into my thoughts.
Yeah,
for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. You realize
I see it like.
What's that?
Yeah, it's very niche. Oh, I see it like musical scales. So I play an instrument, and it's like if your academia is like practicing your scales, you don't then get out in front of the world and perform the scales. You then have to then do your own like public intellectual work. And I think that's my critique. I mean, I'm not in no position to critique the academy, of course, but the intellectuals I like, they may have their certificates, but they're actually able to communicate to the public. The ones who stay walled behind academic paywalls and stuff, I think they're just playing scales to each other. Like, oh, look at this is fancy. And to me, that's not that valuable. I don't want to spend my life doing that anyway.
Me neither. I have definitely put that behind me for a reason, and I would agree with you on that. The ivory tower ain't for me. I like to.
Yeah. We did that already, didn't we?
Dare I bring out Hubbard here? I like to rub elbows with the regular folk, as Hubbard used to say. But I haven't slept with bandits in Mongolia.
Okay.
So anyway, okay. Well, let's go ahead and talk about what we really want to talk about today, which is the recovery process. And you've now had the ups and downs of it enough to see, and the rocky changes of it to see that this is, I'm going to say this more and more as the future, as things go forward here, that getting out of the cult is step one. It's not the end of the process. It's sort of the beginning of it. And there's a road ahead for people. And sometimes that road is shorter than it is for others. It's very, very individual for people as to what the experience may have done and what they want to now reevaluate or change or look at newly. And we've talked about pre-cult identities and second gen people who grow up in it, and does that really apply to them? And how do they figure themselves out? And what does it mean to recover in the first place? And all of these kind of big questions in the ex-cult space, But I think we can agree now that it's a rocky road. What are your thoughts
definitely.
about this stuff?
Well, it's coming up on 8 years. This December, it'll be 8 years for me since the incident, shall we call, happened. And I suppose people could look at our video that we did before where I do my story. And I don't want to go back there. There's still a lot of trauma associated with it. But it's been nearly 8 years. And it's only this year, sometime this year, really only a few months ago, that I have come to understand for myself, or maybe someone else might phrase this as decided for myself, that Scientology is a cult. So, like, I did suspect much earlier on, like, okay, maybe the international base where they're like secluded, that's the cult and the rest isn't. And then later on it became, well, the Sea Org is, but the 9 to 5 staff member workers, that isn't. But just to come to a point where I'm like, oh, this is just a cult, period. That only happened in the last few months. So, when you mention like the journey and what you do out of it, it kind of occurs to me that I've spent 7.5 years coming to step zero, like doing step zero, if you will. Like, well, you got to work, like you say, you can leave the cult physically and maybe some of its day-to-day practices behind, but mentally I wouldn't say I was still in it, but I guess it's not a black and white proposition, is it? It's not like you're in it and then you're not. It's just the ongoing journey. So yeah, it's complex.
Exactly. I think of almost everything, especially when it comes to human experience, on a spectrum now. And I think that is a healthy thing. I think that's a more touching reality kind of thing, because reality exists that way. And we don't live in a black and white world, but we can create one, and we can have one created for us and given to us. And it has a lot of, there's a lot of reasons people find that appealing. It's simple. It gives you very clear direction. Sometimes it gives you purpose or meaning. It's this and it's only this, and there can't be anything else. And so I understand the process of opening up out of those binary sort of thinking, right, is hard. It's an emotional journey, I think.
I think so. And I wonder what you think of this. I've been pondering this, so I'm just putting it out there, but it occurs to me that although Scientology is in many ways slippery and shoddy and shallow, the framework that Hubbard's using is an analytic framework, in that he is trying to make things exact and logical. Like, he has his logics and axioms and so on. I think it's pseudo, of course, but that does create this very black and white thinking. URPTS, this is the handling. And my journey intellectually through linguistics and philosophy, and then later on English literature, was that shift to going. I've started very heavy on trying to study philosophy because I left Scientology, and I'm like, well, if that's not the answer, then tell me the answer. I'm going to go study philosophy, and then I'll find the answer. And I came to the conclusion that, oh, I see, all of these systems are kind of resting on faith or nothing, or just someone's idea. So I moved more towards literature and the philosophy you can pull out of literature, which is much more, yeah, it's not set. It's like interpretive, and you think about it. And that idea of like interpreting and thinking about things very openly. I mean, open mind is a bad thing in Scientology and so on. So just even being able to process for people like you and I who were born into it, to process something in a different way is one of my professors, actually, she described me as a refugee. She said you're like a hidden refugee in plain sight, because I know, like, I look Australian, I sound Australian, I play an instrument and I know music and I know a few things, but then the other 70% of normal life just isn't there. And then the way I process things is just so different. It's fascinating.
It is, isn't it? It is really such a journey of self-discovery when we walk this road with with an introspective nature. And not everybody does that. And I'm not even saying everybody has to do that, but it is such an interesting journey when you have some degree of and willingness to look inside and see what's happening and what's happened to you. You reminded me of something that I used to cling to so hard, and I'd actually given it up so long ago that I kind of forgot about it, which was the concept of standard tech. There is one right way to do a thing, and there is only one senior right way. And Scientology, of course, presents itself as the subject which found all the right ways, right? The one right road. And for a long time after I left Scientology, it was very hard for me to give up that idea. And I was like you, I was looking for, well, where's the answer? Who's the answer? Where is this thing? And like you, it was crushing to me emotionally. I remember many times, oh, these are just ideas people have. This is just nobody's got this figured out, you know? And that can be difficult when you're raised with this idea that, oh, no, there is standard answers to be found. And the human experience seems to constantly push back against that idea.
Yeah, for me, speaking of recovery, psychologically, I knew for a long time that I had a mental breakdown when December 2017 when it happened. That was a proper mental breakdown. I was out for a few months and so on. But I actually have come to recently realize that I was going through another mental breakdown during the time when I did the interviews. There was
Wow.
the memory there is really bad for me. The amnesia is just shocking. And there was a couple days I thought I had spent in bed because I was just really gone. And we don't have to go into too much details there. But I said to my wife, I said, sorry about that. Those couple of days, you must have been really under the pump, looking after everything. And she said, no, you were out for about 3 weeks. I said, 3 weeks. I didn't get up for 3 weeks, apparently. I must have gone to the toilet. I don't remember. But so that, and I really do think what it was, because it started at uni, this realization when because at first it was like, oh, I've studied structural linguistics, and it turns out that has no bottom, like Ferdinand de Saussure, who is the supposed father of this, turns out he didn't actually write the book, and blah 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 blah, things like that. And that was okay. It was like individual segments of intellectual pursuit were groundless, or they're at least boiled down to an opinion or a faith statement or something like that. But then I guess the penny dropped at some point where it was like, I can't find anything that isn't like that. And that really, I still can't process it. I love it. I love it now. I mean, I've moved much more to like, I'd much rather read a Shakespeare play than a book by Bertrand Russell. I have no interest in Bertrand Russell because he's all about that analyticity stuff. So I've come to embrace it, but it was really crushing. Yeah, like you described, like it was, speaking of us second generationers, just trying to process some of these things when you raised to believe it was almost like the sky's blue. No, actually, it turns out it's been red all along. It's like, what?
Exactly. Yeah, no, it is. It's so many moments of that. And it's not easy. I say it's an emotional journey because the ups and downs, it's not just the in the moment emotional reactions, but it's the fact that we're kind of having to face, some demons, I suppose you could say, but also these, well, it's easy to say, but hard to process that when you're raised in Scientology, that is your normal. And then to find out how abnormal it is and how wrong so many parts of it are when we thought it made sense. It was explained to us and given to us and kind of sometimes really laid into us, that this is how it is. And we're not unique in that. I mean, fundamental Christians are raised this way. Fundamental Islam folks raised this way. Fundamental Judaist families are raised this way. Like it's extreme. This is the only way it is.
And fundamentalist secularists as well, Chris.
Well, that too, actually, that too.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
and for me, that extremism is defined literally as pushing you into that black and white mode of thinking. There is only this, and there isn't anything else. And so it's quite a journey. It's quite an awakening to find out just how much there is, and to explore
Isn't it
different
exciting?
ideas.
Isn't that
Isn't
part
it?
exciting though? It's a silver
Yeah.
lining, right? It's like you realize that you were living in, well, I know the community uses a bubble.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, the world's so much bigger. It's so exciting. And all right, I'll give you something. I'll give you this little thought here. So we were raised to believe that we would live indefinitely, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like endless lifetimes. Okay. But just for mathematical purposes, he says in 1952, History of Man 1952, is that it's
Mm-hmm.
early
That's
on
right.
there. He
Yep.
says we've lived 76 trillion years already.
Yep.
So just to flip that around, let's just say he also said 76 trillion years into the future, because infinity, you can't really do math on that. So I asked my friend who's good with math. I'd sort of worked it out, but I couldn't quite get it. I said, if you took a normal human being who's expecting to live another 50 years, so say our age, we might be expecting to live another 50 years, and a doctor said, you went to see a doctor and they said, you've got cancer, you're going to die in a day or a week. Like, how much would that like affect what you'll want to do with the rest of your time? And I said, okay, work out for me 76 trillion years to 50 years. Because I've got, well, I mean, I don't know what happens after this. So, you know, hopefully there's more. That'll be great, right? But I can't say for certain. So if you take 76 down to 50 years, I said, what would be the equivalent of telling that to someone who thinks they've got 50 years? One thousandth of a second.
Wow.
So it's not
Wow.
going to the doctor and going, oh, like I've got a week to live, get your affairs in order. It's like a bullet to the head.
Yeah.
And I think that's really apt, because one of the biggest hurdles for me one of the things I can see I recall in the earlier videos, I'm trying to hold on to that feeling of immortality, because if I criticize Scientology too much and go against it, it's like a mental death sentence, because even now it tenses me up and it frustrates me, because I feel like I know I haven't wasted my life, but it's like, see, there's a reference, there's a line in Handbook for Pre-Clears. So around that same time, he says, you know, you will live again just as certainly as the sun will rise tomorrow. This kind of like pseudo literary stuff that Hubbard does, which I feel like I can say because I finished a degree in literature. So pseudo literary Hubbard.
Certainly
It's not high
qualified.
literature. Yeah, yeah, totally qualified. Um, anyway, I remember reading that when I was 19. Yeah, 19, 2007. Yeah, 19. And making decisions based off that. Because he says you'll live in a young body again, you get to do all this again. So I skipped so many things I wanted to do in my my teens altogether, really, and my 20s. There's like 15 years there of not doing normal things, because you're like, oh yeah, but I'll do this again. And now you go, oh shit, turns out you have no way of guaranteeing that whatsoever. And most people think you probably wouldn't do that again. And I think as well, philosophically, there's probably good reasons not for that life not to work that way. I think that's a different story, but
Right.
reincarnation presents ethical and moral problems, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that like that concept of death being so close. And I spoke to my wife about this, and she said for a long time after leaving, she had a preoccupation with the notion of death, and she would watch a lot of like serial killer documentaries and that sort of thing. And she said she was just fascinated with it. And before we had kids, both of us just flatly admitted of being almost curious to die, to find out the answer.
Mm.
And that is really interesting, just in terms of Scientology being a death cult. It's not a death cult. I don't want to be hyperbolic and be like, oh, Scientology is Hitler. Like, no, but just because Hitler's where everyone goes, right? Yeah. But there is something to that, how that could work psychologically. And I note that a lot of someone told me that the amount of OT8s, the people who have reached the top of Scientology's supposed bridge, have committed suicide and so forth.
Yeah.
And you think, yeah, well, under the ethics and morality or the metaphysics of Scientology, put all that together, one common result would be suicide. Yeah.
It would be easy to justify if you had a Scientology belief set, and it's interesting and actually good that more Scientologists don't go there or don't go in that direction. But we do hear, every now and again we hear these stories of people, we'll just drop the body, just get your end of life assist or whatever. That has happened in the world of Scientology, and we can't say it hasn't. But thankfully, it's not really, at least not within my experience of it at each level of it. It's not an accepted or okay thing to do in that group, to end your life on your own.
It's definitely not. Yeah, I don't want to overemphasize and say there's literally a death cult like the what was that, Solar Templars ones or something, whatever they did, where they were bad stuff. But it can psychologically, I think, fascinate one with the notion of death should things go wrong.
Absolutely. In fact, I will say that for me, and it surprised me when it started happening, but I can't say that it's even fully resolved at this moment. The existential crisis is how I would describe it. It's what is existence? What does it mean? And what happens when it's over? What is that? What is it all for? And what am I doing? And what happens if it happens tomorrow or 20 years from now and it can become it's an emotional issue.
It really is, Chris. It really is.
Yeah. And this is what's caused me to dive into philosophical texts or philosophical works that I never ever would have gone to or gone around before. Never really been a subject that I was super interested in until the last couple of years, when this kind of existential crisis sort of really started manifesting in my own life. And I saw it as a shedding of, the cult stuff. And that's maybe the recovery part, I could say, like, okay, good. No thetans, no immortality. Okay, at least not with that model. Maybe there's something else, but it's not that. Okay, fine. Then what is it? Right? Yeah, exactly. Then you're like, okay, now
I don't want to set your audience up and be like, oh, he still believes it. It's just that if we don't know what it is, then there is still technically a chance that some of it's true in some way. If it is, I'm sure Hubbard's twisted it for his own ends. People are going to really cling on to me saying that.
Yeah,
I don't think it is true. I don't think it's the right model, but it is what it is. If we're uncertain, we're uncertain.
It absolutely is. Well, here's what was so fascinating and frankly, enlightening, and maybe I try to avoid this word now. I don't use it very often, but I believe catharsis is the right word for some of what I experienced in doing some of these recent deep dives into Hubbard's mind, because I had to finally figure out what the hell Gnosticism is, and that's a kind of esoteric, religion for a lot of people, or religious beliefs for a lot of people. And yet it is the framework on which Hubbard built his belief system, which then resulted in Scientology. Between Gnostic ideas.
I've even had conversation with Scientologists about that. That's not even a hidden thing. So you definitely
I never did. Ever. That was never part of my Scientology experience, not even once. And I never would have thought of, when I was in, I was in California and Los Angeles, where I think I can say it's probably, outside of maybe Clearwater, Florida, the most hardcore Scientologists, right? In terms of a ladder of extreme belief or that binary thinking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't get away with having other things come into the belief set. It's Scientology and that's it, right? And so if we started having talks about Gnosticism, it would be like, what are you talking about, you weirdo? Nobody would have entertained that idea where I grew up, right? So
yeah. No, totally. I think it's possible I had, and I think I copped a bit of flack from this last time, but it's reflecting back on how my youth my parents were divorced and remarried, and both of their friend circles, mainly my upbringing in Scientology, consisted of um, Scientologists who were OT, so operating thetan, like up the top of the Scientology bridge,
Right.
from back in the old days, who sporadically would go into the pseudo churches and really didn't like the new management, and we would have drunken barbecues and discuss elements of the tech. So my upbringing was what I was doing on the channels, going, this is what Scientology is like. We discuss what the actual, like, I have very fond memories of my father grilling me on why we're all drunk, on why an acknowledgement is not an agreement. It's just an acknowledgement. And I was 18 and I couldn't do it. He would give me a statement and we were drunk drilling this, right? And yeah, but dad, but and we were all just pissing ourselves laughing. So yeah, for me, Gnosticism was a thing that was probably maybe a little too deep for the conversations we were having, but certainly in the last few years of Scientology, my Scientology the participation, those sorts of conversations did come up. And some people see Gnosticism as a positive thing. There are people, you can go on Reddit, and there are people who are Luciferians.
Mm-hmm.
Because Gnosticism, Lucifer is the morning light, he brings light, and why would God deny us the fruit of the tree and deny us
That's
knowledge?
right.
And that is Hubbard par excellence. That is exactly how he thinks. So yes, that
Yeah.
is like, let's bring everyone the light and the freedom. And yeah, I'm not a Gnostic anymore or a Luciferian. I don't think that is the way forward. But yeah, people like it. But go on, you were going to say something, Chris. You were going to say like it's made of Gnosticism. I kind of wanted to hear what you were going to
Oh
say.
yeah, no, it's just it's fascinating to figure it out for oneself, to see, to see Hubbard's personal writings and then start connecting the dots between between Gnostic tradition and between 19th century spiritualism and
Mm-hmm.
between Blavatsky's work and then, go to Crowley, who Hubbard
To Crowley, yeah.
clearly considered a mentor type figure. And, the Book of the Law and Thelema and the Ordo Templi Orientis practices were something that Hubbard connected with early on in his life. And that's kind of an undeniable fact. There it is in his own writings. It's all there. And so I had never, ever been able to connect all of those dots before. So it was a real kind of, oh, I get it, where he was coming from kind of thing. And then I just got super interested in Gnosticism all by myself, right? Like, what is this? This is really
Yeah.
interesting, because I've had personal issues over the last few years with Christian dogma, and so looking at early years of that
It's a Christian heresy. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it
Yeah.
was a heretical set of beliefs. And to this day it still is, in certain circles. And so I
Which
just
is
find it.
interesting because in this
Hmm.
in this view, you can actually call Scientology a Christian heresy, and that's how I've come to
Yeah,
think of it. It's
that's
very
right.
interesting because you would never say that to people. You'd be like, it has nothing to do with Christianity, and yet, if you trace it right back to 300-400 AD, there it is. It's a Christian heresy. Fascinating. Fascinating.
Especially when you pull out the OT8 bulletin,
Right.
where
Right.
Hubbard literally says he's, fulfilling the role of Lucifer as
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, you're just like,
The
what?
Antichrist, right? Doesn't he say he's the Antichrist?
Yeah. He flat
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
says that that's the role he's fulfilling. And I made the point that it's often misunderstood because people think he's talking about the Christian Antichrist, and he's actually kind of talking about it from a Gnostic perspective. And so
Mm.
it's kind of flipped the whole script. It's in his narrative, Christian God is the bad guy. And
That's Gnosticism. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's Gnosticism, right? And so, but it's so esoteric. So many, especially in America, people don't quite track with that. And so again, breaking it all down for myself was very cathartic, because it really helped clarify where Hubbard was coming from and answered all the questions of, was he a con man, or did he believe? Yeah, he believed, but he didn't believe in what he was telling us. He believed in a whole lower
Yeah.
framework in a way.
I wanted to ask you about that because
Yeah.
I think, well, I'll back up a little bit. I think I copped a lot of deserved flack in my previous interviews because I was watching a podcast. I think it was Lex Friedman a few years ago, and he said to one of his guests, the internet can just smell bullshit. Like it's just a great bullshit filter. If you want to come on and try and bullshit, like it just filters through. It knows. It just they just yeah. You've got more experience on the internet than I do, and I think there was deserved criticism of me because of this still defending of Scientology, and I guess that's probably why I was happy to come back because I don't feel that way. I think Scientology is a cult. I shouldn't have tax exemption. It's the scariest thing in my life, and it's amazing they don't come after me that I know of or anything. But it's just there. Like it's like that's the thought control that we've had from kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I've come to a place now where I do think it's all this stuff and it's bad, and I think that I don't agree when some people say like it's all nonsense and doesn't make any sense and it's word sounds like no. Hubbard was very good at systematizing things and actually grappling on with things that make you feel elated and euphoric.
Yes.
But it's kind of like a drug, like it's actually dangerous. But the question of did he create it because he was like an evil guy who wanted to control people? Or did he create it actually thinking he was doing good, but just was a terrible scientist and had no idea about the consequences of what he was doing? I'm probably more on the latter still. Like you can see I'm still traveling.
Totally.
But I have no idea. Like where do you sit on, I wanted to ask you, where do you sit on like his actual intentions and what do you think about Hubbard? Because I've been more studying Scientology as a text, right? As I think I've said loudly many times, like I'm interested in just the text. What do the texts say? It's called the received texts.
Right.
To me, Hubbard is a separate intellectual question, but on a personal level, I'm fascinated by it. So yeah, tell me, what do you think
absolutely. I see my answer to the question is not actually an either or, it's both. I think Hubbard was I think he was a lot of things. He's a complicated guy, and he also had things going on off screen, right, that he never showed us. Depressive episodes that would last for days, times when he was absolutely positive he was a failure, and then that's how he died as well, convinced he was a failure and that the body thetans were coming to get him. And of course, for him, the body thetans were his interpretation of the Crowley's elemental spirits. Okay. And the sort of external spiritual entities that Hubbard absolutely
eaten by your own mind. That's horrible. God.
Because he started losing his faculties in the 70s, arguably in the 60s, but certainly by the 70s, he had a stroke and he had various other things. And, and we know the medications he was on when he died. We have that documentation. So, and the paranoia, see, I happen to have seen documents that have not leaked out of the church from the 1980s, and Hubbard's writings were classic paranoia. He was writing orders for like LA org. They were called the advices at the time because he couldn't issue orders. And those advices clearly stated that LA org had been infiltrated by the FBI and by, other government agencies. And he was setting up witch hunts internally based on his own paranoia. And this was during the time.
They're still operating like that, aren't they? Because it's in policy now, and they all just
absolutely.
You just sort of set me off. Like that's how I remember it was. It was always everyone was always so tense because everyone was a double agent or something. Yeah,
that's right. His DNA imbues the organization, and the higher you go, the closer you come to that. And when you get to the top with Miscavige, Miscavige is his own person, but he duplicates so much of L. Ron Hubbard. Right.
Seems like his life path might go the same way. I can see him taking to sea when one of these court cases eventually catches up. And, the Scientologist will be told he's doing research or something. And
that's right.
I believe it.
We know when he stops showing up at events, we'll know. And then it's going to have to be, then we're going to start seeing, okay, who's going to be the next in line, or how's this going to work? There's so many possibilities. There's still so many possibilities. But I see Hubbard, just to kind of circle back to this.
Tell me.
I see Hubbard as somebody who, the affirmations, if we didn't have the affirmations, I would never be able to go here. But but his writings on pre-Scient, right before Scientology, and then you connect the dots to where he was at the end of Scientology, and you see a through line of he believed in a God, and now we know that's the Gnostic God. He believed he was a superior being. He believed that he had incredible narcissistic views and ideas about things. He wrote flat out that when people help him, he owes them nothing. Because they need to help him because of his greatness. And he was incredibly misogynistic. And we know this not only from his actions, but his words.
Oh, that's in the text. I can tell you that from the text. Yeah,
It's right in there, right? Yeah. And then it's rife through that part's rife throughout Scientology's text.
Don't forget
as well.
the 5 IQ points you and I get, and those women don't.
Exactly. So there's all these little zingers that are built into the tech and into the policies of the organization, the paranoia, the vindictiveness that he would approach his enemies with from 1950s forward. It was, ruin them utterly. I mean, he didn't mince words when it came to how he felt about his enemies, and his own son testified and said over and over again that he would literally go beat people up and blackmail them to drag them back onto course, So
right.
it was the 50s were a real brutal time in Scientology.
Well, he says in it's an ethics book reference, but you might know where the actual date is because the ethics book's a dateless compilation. But he says he can make Captain Bligh look like a Sunday school teacher in the face of anyone who wants to close the doors on Scientology or something. That's quite a statement. Right. That's quite a statement.
Yeah, it is. And it comes out of 1968 when he started the Sea Org.
68. Right, okay.
Yeah, right. And
is it a flag order that it comes out of, or is it a policy or a flag order? Okay.
Flag order.
The flag orders are unhinged. I would love for someone to send a copy from the Sea Org to some academic somewhere. Stephen Kemp would be hilarious with it. But anyone, it doesn't matter. And I think, even Westbrook, who I think is very sympathetic to the church, pseudo-church, I think he would have trouble going through the flag orders and not coming out with a different perspective. They are unhinged writings. Short, snappy. Yeah.
There's some wild stuff in those things, and there's thousands of them. There were 3,000 plus flag orders written over the years,
and some of them are just like blah blah's promoted to midshipman or whatever. Like he's just like, it's like, that's a flag order. Like, okay, just real strange. Like you can tell that the writing has become more unhinged. Oh, before I forget, speaking of scholars, did you know there is a Scientology? He's actually a DSA. What's that? Director of Special Affairs. So, their OSA, Office of Special Affairs. So I'm trying not to use acronyms without explaining them. They're PR legal henchmen, really. Yeah. He is doing a PhD on Scientology philosophy right now, at the moment. His name is Attila Miklovitz. He's Hungarian. You can Google him. He's been on like their promo videos and stuff. And he started doing it around the time I finished my degree. And I'm hoping that I contributed to this somehow by telling the pseudo-church and publicly on YouTube that I'm going to do this. And when I saw it, of course, my ego took like a massive hit straight away. I was like, oh, I really want to do that first. But then I thought about it, and this was at the time when I had shifted from a philosophy major to an English lit major. And I thought, oh, this is perfect because he's saving me doing all the work. He's going to come out with, here's all the good parts of it, and then I can just supplement that and cite what he's saying and saying, yes, but also this. So anyway, just a fascinating turn of events there, that there is a Scientologist doing a PhD on Scientology philosophy as we speak.
Wow. Well, good luck with that. It's so
well said.
I mean, only because I have been humbled enough times to realize that philosophically speaking, I am a neophyte in that field, right? I admit that right away. But I have been exposed to enough of it. I've read enough, so a little bit of Nietzsche, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, some political philosophy stuff. has been kind of very interesting to me, and Camus has been the most influential for me because my existential crisis went to absurdism, right? Because that's something I can connect with. Like if I can just, laugh this off and note the ridiculousness of it all, that connects with me, right, on a personal level.
All right.
But the depth of philosophy, the appreciation that I have for the complexity and depth of the fabric of it when you can get into it without having to go ivory tower or get into the weeds, but just appreciate what people are trying to do with it. I find Hubbard to be so horribly, laughably simplistic in the way he approached these things. And I get why people, who are not philosophical, who don't have that background or appreciation, would think, oh, that Hubbard, he's the philosopher of philosophers. Yeah. I'm sure Tom Cruise would be the first in line to say, "Oh, Hubbard is the philosopher of philosophers."
The philosopher,
and of course they have no idea. Yeah, they really don't know what they're talking about. It's only when you really dive into the literature that you come to appreciate, how serious these people are as thinkers.
Well, I had came to a point where I realized that you probably actually can't dismiss Scientology on a philosophical level, because just like all philosophical systems, it has its problems. So to merely describe it like I wanted to do originally a couple of years ago was where I was sitting when I was doing the interviews, and it was like I just wanted to describe it. It's not really going to do anything to or against the church or for the church. It's just to describe a system. So really what Miklevitz is doing, I know some people will probably be against that, and I think, well, that was probably an embarrassing moment just there. I probably let my ego out by going, "Oh, screw him." But really, he's actually doing a good thing. More scholarship is good, right? More scholarship is good. And yeah, people like us will be able to bounce off it and say, "Well, yes, but he's forgotten this." I'm sure so what he's doing is he looks like he's taking the route. So he's like, "Well, it's pragmatism. So here's what other pragmatists, American pragmatists, were saying at the time." And Hubbard is drawing on that. So similar to what you might be doing with Crowley and I always forget the Black.
Blavatsky, yeah, Madame Blavatsky.
Thank you.
That's right.
He's pulling on that. So that's interesting. So I've more come to a theology, and now I'm more interested in a theological analysis of Scientology, because I think that's when we move into this stuff you're talking about, Gnosticism, and that's more on that sort of thing. The reason I mentioned Miklevitz, though, how I came across him, is he had published a student paper, which is a published academic journal, and it's called Scientology and Physical Violence or something like that. You can find it. It's on Google Scholar, where he claims that according to the texts, there'd be no reason to consider violence in Scientology, and the reports of Miscavige must be false. Therefore, that's the paper he has published. And I sort of read it, and I'm like, dude, like, you're the DSA, which means you have a direct line to OSA. Like, have you not ever read Hardworking People Ethics Protection? It's on WikiLeaks. The public can find that document if you go Scientology WikiLeaks flag orders, and it says, I found it by typing the phrase into Google, going, "Oh, I remember this phrase. I wonder if it'll pull up." It pulled it straight up, and it was something like, "It is of absolutely no concern whether two SEAL members come into physical contact with each other. If physical violence is to develop, one may possibly be charged with damaging SEAL property."
Correct.
That's
Correct.
The charge. It's not even the charges. The charge is property. So it's like double bad. It's like, to use a 1984 sort of double bad. It's like, it's like, not only is the violence okay, but it's the equivalent of kicking a fucking chair. It's like, anyway. Right. So I just thought that was, well, it's not bizarre that a Scientology scholar is going to write a paper like that, but it's bizarre that the Academy doesn't do some checking on some basis on peer
Well, the
review and
good,
go, hang on, you know.
I'll tell you straight up right now, I am not poo-pooing anybody writing any papers about Scientology, whether they're Scientologists or not, because of that exact reason. It opens the door to peer review and to critique and criticism. And that's the only way that the academic model should work and does work, and that it could be applied to Scientology in that context. I welcome that, because we've had decades of people like Massimo Intervine and other cult apologists writing papers saying, it's all good, it's all good. Look at this fluffy part. Look at this fluffy part. Aren't these things nice? And if somebody really comes at this seriously at the theological and philosophical levels, then they are therefore open to critique and criticism of their views. And what you just cited is one of the key references as to why that would reveal the lie. Yeah, sure, you can say the philosophy, the tone scale, the spirit of play, the theta and theta ratio, like encourage nonviolent behavior. But then how come Hubbard and how come Miscavige freely beat up on people then? How does this make any sense? This doesn't really jive. Not only from a hypocritical level, but literally the writings themselves. That issue you just cited was the subject of a base briefing in PAC in Los Angeles by RTC to us Sea Org members. We were briefed by an RTC staff member. The highest organization in Scientology is RTC, Religious Technology Center, telling us in no uncertain terms there had been a fight between two Sea Org members, and it was completely okay. And in fact, we should be seeing more of that, because if somebody's getting in your road and stopping you from doing your job, you give them a black eye. And he raised his fist and he was like, that's what you do. And guess what? You will not get in trouble with our office if we find out that you were just trying to get your job done and somebody was stopping you. I mean, the message could not have been clearer. It could not have been clearer. So, and then of course you have head on a pike, and you have the scapegoat policy, right? And you have the whole, and Hubbard actually gave a lecture in the Sea Org going into more detail than what the public get with the policy letter about that. There's a policy letter in Scientology that talks about when, certain conditions exist and things are going downhill, you got to ride into town and you got to put a head on a pike. You got to make an example of somebody so that you get discipline in. And this is, pretty typical ship thinking, out on the high seas, right? I mean, I get it. I get where Hubbard got this idea from, but to have Hubbard write this into the DNA of the organization and then put out a doctorate paper saying, "Oh no, Scientology is not violent."
Well, this was I think when he was an undergraduate. It was an undergraduate journal,
okay.
So it would have been like if I had published a paper a few years ago or something like that.
Yeah. It's worth challenging, is what I'm saying. There's material to challenge that position.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And experientially we know better, but I think this is what excites me more about a literary analysis of Hubbard too, and he is described as a literary figure anyway.
Yep.
But these things like the pink bodies over there from Responsibility
Leaders is another one. That's right.
Yeah.
Pink
so
legs.
these are all pink legs. That's right. These are all. If you do literary analysis, you can get into, well, why are these words the ones selected? Why are the words always sort of violence and death and macabre and so on? So that excites me, that sort of stuff. So we'll get there, but
you make a good point. I have no problem with that. And years ago I might have had a very different idea about this, because again, it's coming out of the fixed my way or the highway kind of thinking. And for me, that's been the biggest change in my personality, in my life, in my views of things 12 years out now, right? It's really okay with, and from day one, I've preached tolerance, compassion, understanding, let's get along with people. I mean, those have been principles I've lived by for my whole life, really. Scientology tried many times to beat it out of me, but that's kind of core stuff for me personality wise. But I couldn't or walk that walk because of what Scientology had slammed over me as sort of Hubbard's personality, right? This like, no, there's one right way, and God damn it, this is how we're going to do it. And if you don't agree with me, you're an asshole, right? And get out of my way because you're just CI, you're just counter intention, you know?
Counter intention,
Oh my God, right? And these phrases and these ideas were very, very much a product of Scientology for me. And so it's taken years to sort of shed that. And that's why I talk about the recovery process as being not just giving up beliefs, it's giving up habits, it's giving up mental constructs that you walk around with that the cult put there. You know, this is how L. Ron Hubbard thought about things. This isn't how I want to think about things. And that's what it's like shedding those onion layers or those, you know, skin or something, layers and layers of it. And it just takes time. There's no way to speed up the process. It takes what it takes for people.
Yeah. And maybe you remind me because, you know, with my previous interviews, I think that was part of the problem for me was I was coming out going, you guys are doing it wrong. It's a philosophy and I'm doing it this way. And then I come out attacking you and Aaron and others and just going like, and even when I'm being polite, I think that's the bullshit the internet can smell. They're like, no, this guy really thinks he's the one who's going to like sort this out or something. And I mean, I wouldn't probably go that far, but there's some definite truth to that. Whereas now I actually see myself as part of this community. I see myself as like, oh, there's this other angle that people aren't talking about. Oh, good. Let me fall into that little slot and let me take care of that. And that's probably not going to be too public because it involves a lot of reading books and that's boring. And even for me, you know, sometimes. But you know, but it is what it is. So, and there's a couple things that I could speak about because we've reminded of.
Yeah, tell me.
They've reminded me of them. Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll tell you the one that's on my mind now. So so we all know that every Scientologist has. We spoke about this offline, but you know, we all know that every Scientologist has an IQ of 150 because that's what the Scientology text maxes out. And we all do it so many times that you remember the questions from the last time, and we all have an IQ of 150. Particularly the men, because they get 5 more points for some reason.
That's right.
So I took online. So since the last interview, we spoke 2 years ago, and then I think the last time I was public at all was about 18 months ago or something like that. And since then, I took a whole battery, many times online tests, personality tests and IQ tests and all sorts of stuff, just online. So it's not like official, but just to sort of help me understand different perspectives. And one that really interested me was I took an IQ test online, and the result it gave, it split up. Well, this will make sense in a second while I'm hesitating. It split up spatial intelligence, verbal intelligence, and memory intelligence. And what was really interesting to me was the difference between my spatial intelligence and memory intelligence was I think it was about 17. It was about 17, 15 or 17 points, maybe 20. It was somewhere around there. So that's like a big difference. And I had, and this is now talking about trauma recovery, I had known for a long time that I would use the word shattered. Something happened to me in December 2017 where I was shattered by this particular process that Scientology was doing. It was dreadful. And so for many years, I was like, I was shattered or just like fragmented would be the other word, shattered or fragmented. And my wife and I would talk about this a lot. And then the other thing that we noticed was my memory was just shockingly bad. Nothing before, say, 9 years of age, and very spotty my whole life. Very spotty. Shockingly bad memory. Yeah, the other day when my wife, I gave her $300 for something that she needed, and I'd already given her the $300, and she said, you've already given this to me. I said, why did you tell me? You should have taken the money and run. Anyhow, just some fun there. And we probably should talk about, I'm sure we'll talk about more the dissociation stuff, but just in terms of public speaking, I came to realize that, oh, this is why I have trouble with the public speaking and why I prefer to write. When I write, I can collect my thoughts. I have time. I can reflect. A lot of the academic references I have, I can sort of ballpark. I'm like, oh, someone said something about that here. What was it? And then I spend 10 minutes finding it, and then I get it. And I can collect everything together. But when I'm speaking verbally, I'm very unhappy with what I'm saying, even now, because although less so, because it's a fun conversation, but it 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 was really apparent to me getting into like debate context, watching myself back, going, what are you even? Why are you saying this? You know, there's a better answer here, and yeah, coming to understand the trauma of the memory loss and the fragmentation. And anyway, this is I've come to understand as dissociation from PTSD, complex PTSD
Yeah.
specifically, and
Yeah.
that level of dissociation for me was I've come to understand was so severe that I think as well part of the reason, speaking of recovery, part of the reason I haven't been so like in the past keen to criticize the pseudo church and going, oh, it wasn't that bad or so on, or oh, but this happened to me, but it wasn't that bad, is because it basically happened to someone else. I basically don't remember it. And when I do, it's like a different person. It's a dissociated identity. It's like they never did anything bad to me because I don't
Right.
remember it. So how do you criticize something when you've been, yeah, dissociated to that level?
That's a
And
fantastic observation, by the way.
Ruck, thank you. Well,
Yeah.
it the lens I am looking, so I've spent most of my time on philosophy and now more literature and some linguistics as well. But lately I've finally started getting into a bit of psychology, and the lens that I've come to understand auditing through is dissociation. And
Yeah.
I can't say that's true for everyone, but it seems to me that the objective processes in particular dissociate you. And
Yes.
even Dianetics and so on, the way it goes about trying to erase things is to dissociate you from something that happened and is actually important. You shouldn't be forgetting something. You know, let's say you were beat up violently as a teenager or something. I don't know, but you don't want to forget that. Like, I'm not saying that we shouldn't address things in therapy, but not the way that Hubbard twists them.
That's right.
So, yeah.
That's right. I could not agree more. I absolutely agree with you about that.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. We have related it to and compared it with hypnotism, covert hypnotism, not therapeutic hypnotism, not stage
Yeah,
hypnotism.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's a way of people have described hypnotism as guided imagination.
Yeah,
There are
fair
different
enough.
phrases you can use for it. John Atack is more an expert on this stuff than I am, but creating disassociated states is how you get somebody out of their head and exterior,
Yeah,
right? Especially when you're indoctrinating them, educating them beforehand in all these words and all these phrases and all these concepts of what is expected of them. And so therefore, people deliver what's expected of them. I think auditing would be a vastly different experience for people if they didn't first do all that prep, all the pre-hypnotic suggestion that they then put you into this trance state, a kind of a dissociated state. And then you have this expectation that you're going to go through something and come out the other side, and then you're supposed to be keyed out, right? You have blown charge. And it's this whole model of mental activity that I believe is a complete fantasy. I don't think there's any reality to, charge as Hubbard describes it, certainly not when he brings the electronics into it. And,
Mm.
the use of the e-meter, we've gotten to debunk that very, very thoroughly. So So the whole model is sort of a created environment to put you in a headspace where Hubbard is really controlling and guiding your imagination through this whole process. And actually, what he's really doing is dissociating you. He's creating a separation between you and reality. And this is the only way that people could be popped out of their heads and go off on grand tours to Venus and Mars and things like this. It's really quite wild because as you mentioned very briefly earlier, it's a way of inducing an awe experience. Where and again, with the expectation that that's what's supposed to happen, and you're not done until it does happen. So we're going to keep going until that FNVGIs happens.
The way you're pointing at me, I'm like,
yeah, sorry, but yeah, right, like that's kind of how it's run, right? And you could be in there for 10 hours just touching walls or picking up a bottle or being sent back down memory lane, and now you're going to make up Civil War stories, or you're going to make up blowing up planets 76 trillion years ago because that's what Hubbard said we got up to. It's really quite amazing when you step all the way out of it and see all the points of control that are laid in before you even get into that auditing session, and why he stresses read the books, do the training, right? He wants that indoctrination in place so that you will respond to what he wants you to do. And this is why I think, John, and why I now agree, and I didn't for a long time, but I agree now that it is a kind of mental enslavement that Hubbard is searching for, right? But that's a take on it. I'm willing for people to see it differently. I'm no longer if you don't see it my way, then you're an asshole, right?
I was just going to say the same thing. I don't when you say that now, I don't get up inside and be like, no, and I'm kind of open to it. My lens is looking at it. Well, first of all, psychology is more your warehouse and John's warehouse. So I'm out of my depth really. All I had to say, I said. So I could echo what you said. You're like, yeah, more of what Chris said. My concept of it isn't quite enslavement. It's more like a drug, but a drug is enslavement in a different,
it's an addiction.
You want to look at that. It's an addiction. Yeah. And that's why people always had to go back and do more. And when you're not doing it, you feel empty. I've started watching Star Trek, the original series. I know you're a Trekkie as well.
Big fan.
So I grew up on Star Trek Voyager and then later watched The Next Generation, but I never watched the original series because, it's too, graphics aren't good enough and stuff. But I'm a bit older now and I don't care about that. But I'm up to episode 10, and last night was, I think it was called The Mind's Dagger or something like that, the Dagger of the Mind or something. And it was about Kirk was going to this penal colony where it turned out that the guy running it was basically like a psychiatrist, and he was using this special beam machine to like empty your mind, and then he would give you positive suggestion. Yes. And I really like the ending because in the end, the bad guy gets caught in the machine and he dies, and they say, but then McCoy or Spock says to Kirk at the end, but the machine wasn't on high enough for him to die. How come he died? And Kirk, having been in the machine, said, you have no idea what it's like to have your mind emptied and to want that torturer to give you all these hypnotic suggestions. If you're in that same empty mind state, we could say it's dissociation or hypnotism, and there's no torturer there, then it's just empty, and that could kill you. That was the theory of the episode. And I thought, God, that's so fascinating with what we're saying here in terms of that you've got to go back for more, because I remember as a Scientologist, and these are some of the things I'm dealing with now in therapy. I could tell you about my first day going to therapy. It was like, woo. But psychologist, woo, scary, But yeah, it that emptiness, you need to go back and have more of it. And Scientologists are like, I know a Scientologist right now who he's in like hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and just keeps getting into more debt just to get another session in, because it's like without it, he's more than lost. He's scratching an empty itch inside his head,
Yeah. Oh God, that's such a great way of putting it. I could not agree more. I watched people who I, can see now. And even when I was in, there were some people who were so, the right word is addicted. I don't know a better word to use. There were a couple people back all the way to my Santa Barbara days who just kept like on daily, big long notes to the CS. Oh, my FN, dwindled a little bit, and I'm just not sure, and I just need a session. Don't you understand? Just get me in session. And it really was like kind of a drug addict trying to get their fix. It's the only real analogy for what I was witnessing. And now I understand why, right? And I think it's exactly what you just said. And of course, I will totally pimp Star Trek, the original series, because that's the quality of writing that was evident in that series. There were some real heavy hitter sci-fi writers and really creative talent behind that original series that really brought some amazing stories to the screen there, even with all the low budget foam rocks, And
also, every episode I pause and I say, here's the babe for this episode, sweet. And she comes in and, it's so the treatment of women because they're trying to be futuristic, and they had a horror on the bridge, and that's fine. But, well, you can't predict the future entirely, can you? But yeah, it's probably the biggest thing that most people might be funny with the show now is just the treatment of women. It's like even the uniforms, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
but anyway,
those mini skirts or something else, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, just because I mentioned it, I have started going to therapy, and that's been immensely helpful.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Of course. Well, one thing, and I know you're not pushing in any way, but it's great to have privacy is one thing. Like in Scientology, everything's written down thoroughly, and it's like it's great to have that person who I'm just speaking to, and it's just between us, and that she makes some notes because she wants to. Oh, remember this day you said? I was like, oh right, and we're working together. But even the folder itself is there's a word, but here's my memory is letting me down, but it's anonymized to some degree. It's like it's got some initials on it or something. It's not your full name, and they're just she showed me the notes. They're just sort of scribble notes, not like a Scientology thing where they're writing down your every thought so they can later bring it up against you or whatever, or if they want to do that. So that's great. Very early on, she picked up on me. She said, this isn't really about trying to find like the magical moment. It's just we're working through things over time and stuff. And that's really come home to me, that how much Scientology is about just like, oh my God, the universe is amazing now, and you can see that in the success stories they write. And I've actually come to loathe that approach to thought in general, even philosophically or out in the streets with anything. When anyone wants like a sudden, quick, like fix of the universe or a country or something, I'm like, look, that sort of stuff is the Scientology, they make these PSAs on public service announcements on the psychiatric drugs, and they say like side effects include. And I feel like someone could make one on Scientology, because I know I could feel better, euphoric briefly, by having a Scientology session. Like I'm sure I could find an independent Scientologist and have that done. But I said to Anne, my wife, I said, yeah, side effects include loving my son less, loving my wife less, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, yeah, losing all my money, going out of business, like, having another mental breakdown, whatever. It seems like a comical ad someone could make about Scientology. It's just like,
absolutely,
they talk about side effects, but yeah. And the other thing I want to say on therapy, yeah, just the little anecdote of the first day. I said to her, I literally believe that people with white coats are going to come bursting in and like wrap me up in a blanket and a straitjacket and take me away. And I'm not making it up that I believe that. I'm not even having you on. And she got it. She's like, okay, I believe you. I was like, yeah. And that it took a few sessions. They're not called sessions. I just mean sessions as in periods of time. Took a few meetups for that to dissipate. And now it's great. I look forward to it. Yeah, we're starting on a regular basis, and it's wholesome. It's improvements are coming gradually, and they're incorporated into my life. There's no like, all Scientologists will know, if any Scientologists are ballsy enough, is not the word I want to use, but it's the one that came ballsy enough to watch this video, like they know Scientologists, you go in session, they come, oh my God, no, I've sold the business and I'm moving to Flag right now. Because no, don't you have a wife and kids? Yeah, they'll follow it around because I got to go clear right now because like that like sudden shift of attention stuff is I find very scary and unnerving. And I don't like people like that around me. Like, no, no, thank you. I want stable people. Like, one of the biggest goals my wife and I have for our kids is for them to be able to go to the one school or, two or something like that, like not to move them around constantly and things like
Right,
this.
right.
So yeah, there's some
Absolutely.
thoughts for you.
I'll tell you, you're describing, at least what Scientology induces in some people is this kind of manic state. It's this kind of like, must, it's not good. It's not healthy for people. Let's just put it that way. And the other thing that I'll share, because since we're on the topic of therapy, I think I've said this before. I'm not sure, but it was so hard for me to it wasn't my first therapeutic session, but it was one of my earliest ones where the hour was up and I was in tears. I was like, and she's like, okay, well, good to see you next week. And I was like, you can't just leave me like this, because I was so from the auditing where you never leave somebody. You can't go to the examiner bawling your eyes out. Oh, I feel so horrible. Where's your, red tag? Here we go. Get him fixed in 24 hours. If you're not like blown out, then it's some kind of a therapeutic failure in Scientology. And that ain't the case in real therapy at all. The tears are a necessary step in the process, but they're not under any obligation to make sure you're happy at the end of the session. That's not what we're doing in therapy. You described it perfectly. It's a long-term process, and we're not here for some specific result. We're here to see what happens.
Exactly. And what you said there is such a good example of how Hubbard takes an idea that on the surface seems like a really gentle, caring idea. Like, oh, let's make sure someone never is unhappy at the end of a session. Yeah. But then that immediately, the logical endpoint of that is, oh, you're not happy? Okay, well, we're going to go another 10 hours if we have to. And that's how I unraveled in the end and I had noticed this generally, I had noticed this for a long time in Scientology auditing sessions, that the more intense they were, like in terms of time, like getting them done constantly and go, like at the more advanced facilities they have, they call them advanced, more full on pressure, high pressure auditing, the worse I would get. But the auditing I had in my younger years when it was in Sydney Day Org, so this is just your lower level Scientology place, and it was my stepmom was giving it to me, and it was like once in the morning for a couple hours, then I'd go live the rest of my day. That wasn't horrible. Like that was, I still would put it on the negative side of the ledger looking back on it, but it wasn't like mind destroyingly horrible. Right. Because you can step away and live a bit and so on.
Right. Yeah. That's right. No, it absolutely gets more intense as you go up the line. And that's by design. That's absolutely by design. And it's there's reasons for that. We don't have to get into it today, but it's just, it's about making you more and more hardcore. And that's, in my take is that's part of the mental slavery is the shackles get stronger and stronger and stronger on you. Which is why people at the levels of OT7 and OT8 truly are in a dangerous place, in terms of their mental health and well-being. I mean, because they're that's every day. It's, on OT7, it's 5 sessions a day, or you're not doing it right, and and then you get to OT8, and it's just such a plot twist. Fuck you at the end of, you climb all the way to the top. You've given $1 million, and then Hubbard says, oh, hey, guess what? It was all a fantasy, and now we're going to really start confronting your track. And you're like, what? What? I
Well, if you
mean,
say that, then you're going to spend another $1 million getting back to OTA, right? So you're going to say,
yeah. I mean,
yeah, that makes total sense.
it's
Yeah, yeah.
crazy. It's crazy making. It's crazy making. Put it that way.
I've got one more. I've got one more recovery story for you, which is
Tell me.
probably the most important one, I would say, actually.
Yeah.
This really helped me to understand. Oh, this helped me. God, it was a wake-up call to understand, like, oh, I need to start addressing the psychological or emotive side of this. So, have you ever woken up and maybe you sleep in the wrong way and you have like a pain in your chest and it's like feels like someone's stabbing you, like if you breathe too deeply, and so you have to stand up and stretch, and then the
Hmm.
pain goes away. Have you ever had that?
Oh, yeah.
It's like a
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay. So
As
one
you get older,
morning,
you'll have it more too.
great. Okay. So one morning, I had that and uh, I stood up and it wouldn't go away.
Mm.
And it's starting to hurt more and more, and I'm freaking out, and I'm starting to feel lightheaded. And I'm like, okay. So I step out of the room and into my wife was in the shower with our daughter. She's 2. And I step out just outside the door, ready to fall into the bathroom if something is bad to happen. But I'm like, I don't want to worry her if nothing's happening. I'm like, okay, no, I'm not going to do that. So I go back to the bed and I sit down and I start like cold sweating profusely. And I lie down. And after a few minutes, I'm like, okay, I'll Google. No, I'm skipping ahead. So as the cold sweat's happening, I thought, I'm a suppressive person and I'm going to die and I deserve this. Now, this is only a few months ago. This is after I had intellectually left Scientology, come to believe it was a cult, and started having therapy. I told my therapist, so I Googled it and we called the ambulance and they confirmed it wasn't a heart attack. And because the Googling, of course, it's like you're probably having a heart attack. And I'm like, fuck. So we got the ambulance over and they said, no, it's probably just you had a panic attack with the pin. The pin just took a bit long, the pin and needle, just to get it loose.
Sure.
So, okay. I spoke to my therapist about this. I said, I thought I had left Scientology. I'm done with all this. Like, and she said, yes, but your body keeps score, right? That book. I haven't read it, but we've spoken about it, right?
Yes.
You've been trained a certain way your whole life. So in a moment of trouble, the Scientology can still kick in.
Yep.
And that really solidified my desire to pursue therapy because on a day-to-day basis now, I feel pretty free of it. There will be lots of things still kicking around that I'm not aware of, but I don't feel like I'm in it so much. But when stress happens or a moment of severe stress like that,
Yeah.
it can kick in. So then part 2 of this story, which is the fun part, I had to go get some wisdom teeth removed from and it's covered under our Australian Medicare system, so it's free. So you go to a hospital, and that means you're going to wait there all day, but that's fine. It's free. Save you a couple $1,000s in dental fees. So I'm there, and I'm real nervous. This was only a few weeks after this false fake heart attack, pseudo heart attack, shall we say? And the nurse said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Look, here's the situation," and I'm kind of shaking now, just going over it. But I said, I grew up in this cult. I explained to her what it was. I said, and according to its theory, I'm supposed to die anytime now, just randomly. And I said to her, I said, because she picked up, I had asked her questions. So they're going to put me under to remove some wisdom teeth. Okay. And I say to the nurse, how many people die doing this procedure? And she says, removing some wisdom teeth. I'm like, yeah, like 1 out of 100. She's like, no one. No one dies from wisdom teeth removal. I mean, unless there's some weird complication or something. And I said, well, that'll be me. And so she had the hospital psychologist come to see me. And it turned out that he was a doctor who was studying psychiatry. And he said, well, I can give you something to calm you down if you like. And I thought, yeah, sure, why not? I've never had any drugs in my entire life. And I thought that they were going to give me, I don't know what I thought it was, but I thought it would just be like a sedative, like an unknown, because Hubbard says when you go PDS type 3, that's your, like, PDS type 3 translation to the real world just means you go insane, lose your mind. Then you can
Psychotic
give people
break.
sleep,
Yeah.
psychotic break it. You can give people
Yeah.
sleeping drafts. So I figured they were going to give me something like that, but he brings it to me and it was called tramazepam preen, or it was a benzodiazepine.
Mm.
And he said, since you've never had anything in your entire life like this, we're going to give you the lowest possible. We're going to give you 10 mils of this one. And I was Googling it after I'd taken it, just to skip ahead, what the comparison to like Prozac and stuff was. And it was like, yeah, like 1/100th of a Prozac tablet they had given me or something.
Right.
Anyway, it was so incredible. It was so good. So I'm sitting there all nervous, and he said it'll probably take about half an hour to kick in, 15, 20 minutes. And yeah, I was just sitting there, just so happy, just chill the whole day. And when my wife picked me up, oh, so the kicker is they had some emergencies come in, so they couldn't get to me. So I just sat, so I'm actually going back in a few more weeks, and we'll see how I go. But I just sat there in the hospital waiting room the whole day in my gown, just chill. And then when Anne came to pick me up, I was just listening to her, and I said, I'm just listening to you right now, and there's no other thoughts happening. There's no stuff. I'm just listening to you, and I'm perfectly interested in what you have to say. This is fantastic. But when I went to read to Noah, my son, he's 5, I read him a little bit of a story each night, and we were reading through Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I had so much trouble grasping the thought that you would sit there reading words. I was like, if I'm on this pill, that's the end of any academic studies or writing.
Right.
That's like the end. It is definitely, for me, my experience of it is like a chemical, like lobotomy. It was
Fair
like
enough. Yeah.
it was I was like, okay, so this isn't a solution. But just in terms of having had the experience of like, I can see why, just from a marketing perspective, Hubbard is so anti psychiatric drugs. Because if a Scientologist has a psychiatric drug just once, I reckon they'll be like, hang on, I know this feeling, and I can get it from a pill, and it's probably just as safe, frankly. So, if you're going to take it regularly, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where you stand on. I've opted not to take any drugs at the moment. I'm still
Fine.
hesitant.
Yep.
I read a book by Andrew Scull, I think his name was. Ironically, his name is Andrew Scull. He's a professor of the history of psychiatry at Columbia or something like that. It's called Desperate Remedies. It
Mm.
only came out like a couple of years ago, and it covers the last 200 years of psychiatry. And, you know, I, I will err on the side of Hubbard in this case, like his critique of lobotomy and some of these psychotropic drugs that
Absolutely.
go around. He's
Absolutely.
not wrong. He's not wrong.
He's
It's
not
just
wrong.
that snake oil he's selling is not better.
That's
But
right.
yeah, so I don't know where I sit on that. But yeah, I just wanted to tell you this story, just apart from the
Yeah.
fun of being on the benzo for a day. But just, yeah, it was my first drug trip ever, right?
Yeah.
And but more to the point of what I want to talk about with you with cult recovery is, isn't that amazing that even now, that would only happen to what, 3 or 4 months ago, that I'm like, no, I'm totally done with that. But then in a moment of expected death, that is the only thought I have. Oh, and I had some others afterwards about it was also giving me clarity about what I really care about, because I was able to speak down and say, do this, this, and this. These are the important things.
Mm.
But that, yeah, that first thought that comes in, like, you're an SP, you're gonna die, you deserve this. How
Mm.
fucked up is that? It's been like
Man.
nearly 8 years, and there it is. So yeah,
Yeah.
the journey is rocky. The journey
Yeah.
is rocky.
Yeah. I could not agree with you more. And I hear every word. And as far as the medications and all that, it's what you need. Whatever your journey is for you, that's what it is. I have said many times that in so many ways, psychiatry is still the wild, wild west. It barely holds the status of science. Because when we're dealing with human beings, the variables are infinite. I mean, there's just so much going on, and I have played my own medication roulette in finding the right medications for me, the medication, I should say, because I'm only on one. But and it's for ADHD, not for trauma. Trauma has sort of exited my life over time, and with just talk therapy,
Good for you.
that. Yeah, it's really great. It's really great. I have, it went from nightmares and the trigger stuff on a fairly weekly basis to if I have one of those once a year at this point, it's like, wow, that I had one of those back in the Sea Org dreams,
I'm on the nightly train, Chris, every
I get
night
it.
without
I get
fail.
it.
Yeah.
And you're
And
in
that's been that
therapy
way
and you're
for many
stirring
years.
stuff up, and
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. I believe me, I do.
Although they have shifted, so a few years ago, and I want to let you speak, but a few years
Yeah.
ago they were like, I was fearful of leaving and they were attacking me and I was going to lose all my friends. The dreams now are consistently that I'm being kicked out or I'm leaving, and I'm like, oh well, I gotta go. Like so it's a healthier dream at least, but it's still a
Yes.
nightly, yeah, every
Yes.
night without fail. Yeah.
Exactly. It
Anyway,
changes.
yeah.
I'll never forget. I can't remember when this happened, when the conversion happened, but there was a specific point years ago where the dream changed. And I'm not talking about lucid dreams. I'm talking about like controlling my dreams. I'm not into that.
Yeah.
The dreams are what they are. But I
Same for me. Yeah.
shifted something where in the dream I had been having these back on the Sea Org base, back under orders, security watching me, being ordered around, and vying and trying to get back in people's good graces and things like that. And something changed at some point where I went, wait a minute, I can leave. I can just get up and walk out of here.
That's it.
And suddenly the dream became like leaving the base, not wanting to stay on the base. And
so same. Yeah.
yeah, and after that, it was different. It was different after that. So, and that's the point when they really started. I believe, if my memory serves, that's when they really started tapering off and stopped being so dramatic and important and triggering.
Well, I look forward to that.
Yeah, hey, and I hope something like that happens for you. It's like I said, it's an individual journey for everybody, and unlike Scientology, where they tell you they're not going to evaluate for you and then do nothing but I truly am like, hey, whatever you're going to experience, that's for you. So Definitely. There we go. I think I'm gonna start wrapping up today, Jason. I think we've had a good talk today, and I want to thank you for being willing to, do what you've done here, in a public way, and also, of course, for reaching out to me in the first place, months ago, and sort of, settling that, because that was, and I was glad, very, very glad to do that, because I hate it when things end badly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So this was good. And I think this will be helpful for people. That's the whole goal of this, right? Is give some people a little window into this path and what it might look like and what it might sound like or feel like for people. For those not on this path, I hope this was educational for you. And for those who are, again, I hope this was educational for you, in that it's a process. It's going to take time. Be patient with yourself. If there's any rule here, that might be a good one. And I wish you the best moving forward, Jason.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And you.
All right, folks out there, if you enjoy the show, give it a thumbs up, give it a like, give it a share. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.